I'm with Professor Christine Fair, a professor of security studies at the Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. She's a South Asia scholar, has worked a lot on Afghanistan, Pakistan, and especially in Pakistan. In 2019, Professor Fair wrote a book on the Lashkar-e-Toiba called In Their Own Words, Understanding the Lashkar-e-Toiba. And in 2014, Professor Fair wrote a book on the Pakistan Army called Fighting to the End, the Pakistan Army's Way of War. Professor Fair, first of all, welcome to the Tribune. And my first question to you is about the strikes that the Indian Air Force has undertaken in Pakistan overnight, striking 9 locations in Bahawalpur, Muridke, and in parts of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Your first comments.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's always nice to speak to you. So first of all, I think like a lot of other analysts, I got this wrong. I didn't anticipate that they would attack Muridke and Bahawalpur,
Why not?
because, well, there are a couple of reasons. This attack isn't like what happened in Pulwama a few years ago. We don't have the smoking gun. In Pulwama, we had a suicide bomber. We had a suicide video. We had all of the imprimatur that said a Jaish-e-Mohammed attack, and that Jaish was responsible for that attack. So we don't really have a smoking gun in the same way that we did in Pulwama. Although U.S. officials had said that they had reposed confidence in Indian intelligence tying the attack to Lashkar-e-Toiba. The other reason why I didn't assess that an attack was going to happen in the Punjab was because it is just so provocative. Now, let's be clear. India attacked terrorist targets in the Punjab. So I am not condemning these attacks by no means. In fact, these are by all measures proportionate attacks, given that Muridke is the headquarters of Lashkar-e-Toiba. Bahawalpur is, of course, the notorious headquarters of Jaish-e-Mohammed, which was a group that was not involved in this attack. Like many people, I had anticipated attacks in Pakistan administered Kashmir. And I had even thought that it was possible, part of if there were LET targets in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, I thought that might be possible because of the population density issue. But India went and prosecuted targets that are in the Punjab. And I was very much surprised by this.
So is that significant, Professor Fair? You know that the Indian government has accused, or actually in the wake of the Pahalgam attacks on the 22nd of April, in which, as you know, 26 innocent civilians were brutally murdered. In the wake of that, the Resistance Front, which is a group which owes allegiance to the LET, the Lashkar-e-Toiba, did take responsibility, although they sort of said a few days later that, they were sort of washing their hands off it.
Right.
Why do you think the Indian attack on Muridke, why do you think that is so significant?
So it's significant because it is ground zero for the Lashkar-e-Toiba. It is the Lashkar-e-Toiba's ideological and operational headquarters. So India in this attack is really hitting the return address of the Pahalgam attack, and I applaud the Indians for doing it. To be completely clear, just as I applaud the Indians for sending a strong message by attacking Bahawalpur, which is the ground zero for the Jaish-e-Mohammed network.
So what is this strong message by attacking both the LET headquarters in Muridke and the Jaish-e-Mohammed headquarters, which is the group that India believes took responsibility for the Pulwama attack in 2019? So Muridke and Bahawalpur, what is so special?
So I got to be really honest. So apart from applauding the Indians for being able to deliver precise targets, and given how densely populated Muridke and Bahawalpur are, that the casualties are so low, this is all evidence of a job well done. But I also have to say that nothing is going to strategically change. India doesn't have the means of imposing upon Pakistan a defeat that would make Pakistan change its behavior. So what I anticipate is going to happen is that this crisis is going to have an off-ramp. There's going to be a crisis. The Pakistanis are going to respond because the target, by hitting the Punjab, which is also ground zero for the Pakistan army, you have pretty much guaranteed a Pakistani response of some sort. So when this crisis does retaliate, there's going to be some stasis in the violence in Kashmir for some time, just as we saw this post Pulwama. But people forget that the Pakistan Army is an insurgent organization. The Pakistan Army's aim is not to defeat India. It can't defeat India. The way you show how an insurgent organization demonstrates that it hasn't been defeated is by acting again. So after this crisis, I thoroughly anticipate that after a few years of calm, there's going to be another terrorist attack in Kashmir. So, I think India is left in this very ignominious position of having to mow the lawn every so many years and hopes that with each attack, India can show more resolve, more technological sophistication, more willingness to attack targets that people like me thought were previously off limits. But I don't think that these are going to be strategic game changers, unfortunately.
Okay, so two questions, Professor Fair. The first is that the Pahalgam attack on the 22nd of April, which the resistance front took responsibility for. Do you believe that the Pakistan military orchestrated that attack?
So I believe I generally follow the tenet of Occam's razor. That the simplest explanation is probably the correct explanation. An attack of this nature, of this size, has strategic consequences. And a group like Resistance Front, which is as you said, an offshoot of the organization that I've spent. Actually, I have a recent book. My most recent book came out in 2023, also on the Lashkar-e-Toiba. These organizations don't conduct strategic attacks without the imprimatur of the ISI. So does this mean that General Headquarters, that the Army chief signed off on this attack? Not necessarily, but I do believe that his ISI chief did.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so are they playing good cop, bad cop, the ISI chief and the army chief?
No, they're all the same cop.
Okay.
They're the same cop. There's no good cop and bad cop. What I do think is, of course, interesting is that the Pakistanis appointed the ISI chief to also be the NSA.
That's right.
Now, this was what I would say is a move that Pakistan undertook, knowing full well what was going to happen, so that when negotiations did begin with Ajit Doval, the Indians wouldn't have to worry, is there distance between the civilian NSA, like, for example, was the case with Moeed Yusuf and the army chief. There's no light of day between the army chief and his ISI chief, who is also now the NSA.
The second question is, prior to the Indian strikes, the Pakistanis, have for the last couple of weeks been asking for proof. Why do you think that the Pakistanis, they keep saying, why do you think the Pakistanis are behind this? And they've sort of, there's been a lot of argument back and forth, not just between the governments, but also between civil societies. What do you make of that?
So the reason why Pakistan uses proxies is there's always plausible deniability. And that plausible deniability exists between Pakistan's government and Pakistan's army, and Pakistan's army and Pakistan's people, and also between the Pakistan army and the international community.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to say, no, we didn't do it. There's no proof. We denied it. India is just attacking us without provocation. Bolsters Pakistan's position in the international system as a victim. And when statements such as that issued by the EU, which puts the onus on both sides to de-escalate, both sides to resolve their differences peacefully, this both-sidism actually rewards Pakistan substantially, because it reinforces in Pakistan that somehow its constant howling of the victim card has paid off. And it also punishes India by equating India, the victim, with the perpetrator.
So with this Pahalgam attack, if the EU or the European Union is trying to sort of be even-handed, if you like, between these two, South Asian nations, and as Donald Trump has said more than once in the last couple of weeks, oh, these guys, they've been fighting for thousands of years. What do you make of that? I mean, is it that the Western communities or the Western powers don't understand where this terror is coming from, to attack innocent people in India?
So I can't speak for the EU because I'm very dubious of the EU as a concept. It's hard for me to get my head around a notion of the EU and what it represents and how it comes to a consensus amongst its polyphemus, its various
Okay.
subunits. But in the United States, we just have a problem. We don't have a cabinet. We have a kitchen drawer, and which is, if you don't know American politics, what that means is our cabinet, which uh, is just peopled by a bunch of morons who don't have a goddamn clue. These are all people who were selected because they were Trump sycophants. Unlike Trump's first term, where I may not have agreed with the policies, but that he generally had professionals in place, although the professionals tended to retire and turn against him, declaring him to be like an irrational, fascistic madman. In Trump too, he sort of skipped the having the professional cabinet members and just went straight towards the sycophants. So I don't think we have people in the US government who really do understand South Asia. Now, I am very heartened, and I don't know if he's been confirmed yet, but the person that was targeted to be the Assistant Secretary of State, Assistant Secretary of State is Paul Kapoor. I
Mhm.
know Paul Kapoor well. He and we are often of the same minds when it comes to Pakistan. So
Okay.
I don't know where Paul Kapoor is in the system, but I know that he is interacting with people, which is why I've been a little bit surprised by the United States fumbling of its messaging towards India, because I know what Paul Kapoor would be saying. Paul Kapoor would not be pulling this both sidisms. He would be putting the blame firmly with Pakistan. So I can't. There's, it's worth pointing out, and the reason why I'm stumbling a bit is because I I lack the words to describe the incompetence uh, of the Trump administration. But I
I,
want to point out that he's departed from previous US policy of not both sidisms, right? Starting with Obama, Obama firmly sided with India and said that we defend India's right to defend itself.
right.
One could even say that one of the motivations in supporting this attack in Pahalgam was to shore up the flagging image of the Pakistan army, because whenever there is a conflict with India, people forget how much they are angry at the Pakistan army and they rally behind that Pakistani flag.
In this case, if the Pakistan army is behind this, and even if the army chief didn't directly sign off, but what you're saying is that there is a strong link between the Pakistani military establishment and these terror groups Lash,
Absolutely.
like the Lashkar and the Jaish, they would know. Would they know?
Of course they would know. I just wrote a piece with Ilyas Khan. I think it's called for the Journal of Islamic Ideology, where we present this document that Ilyas had translated for me. It's a book written by an LET mastermind. It
Mhm.
lays out the things that the LET does for the Pakistan Army. We're very accustomed to thinking of the LET as working for the Pakistan Army as a proxy branch of the institution. But here, this book lays out the ideological ways in which the Lashkar-e-Toiba helps the Pakistan Army.
Mhm.
So, it goes without saying that if this was a Lashkar attack, whether they're killing innocent children and women, or whether they're killing military personnel, the effect is largely the same, is that they are demonstrating that there is no true peace in the valley. And that is ultimately, when I talk about the Pakistan Army being an insurgent organization, India has to defeat Pakistan. Pakistan only has to show that it hasn't been defeated. And how Pakistan demonstrates that is by attacks like Pahalgam.
Professor Fair, can I ask you about what do you think is the difference between what happened this time and the Balakot strikes?
Well, a lot of things. Well, first of all, I'm just waking up, right? You called me at 5:30 in the morning, and I was just literally getting my sad self out of bed, and trying to read the news. And so far, we haven't really seen a lot of confirmation of the damage assessments that the Indians did, and we haven't seen any confirmation of Pakistani claims. But
Right.
looking back at Balakot, where there's been a lot of assessment, what's pretty clear is the Indians used standoff missions from Indian airspace to strike the Balakot facility, which was a Jaish-e-Mohammed facility, and that the targets were off. The targets were systematically off, and there wasn't the destruction the Indians claimed. But in the fog of war, and when you're trying to appease your people who are demanding retribution, that's adequate recompense. I mean, most of your average Indians didn't look at the satellite imagery analysis that came out 2 weeks later, right? So what we learned from India was that India used this new munition spice. It could target Pakistani targets, if you will, in Pakistan proper, right? It was in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So
Mhm.
this was a significant demonstration of capability.
Mhm.
And the dogfight that ensued, what we actually saw was that the Indians didn't fare so well. And I'm not the best person to be the analyst of the air war that ensued, but the
Right.
facts speak for themselves. Um, so what's different here
Yeah.
is, and of course, where they attacked in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa was not a populated area; it was a mountainous area, and
Right.
the attacks that were targeted here in the Punjab were densely populated areas. But they seem to have hit the targets that were intended, which is really important, and they seem to have done so in a targeted way without a lot of civilian collateral, which is also a really important dimension to how Pakistan is going to have to frame its response.
But you are saying that that the difference between the Balakot strikes in 2019 and the one today is that in Balakot, the Indian missiles missed their target. Is that what you're saying?
They missed the targets. They didn't do any damage. And these appear, again, I have to caveat this because when Balakot first happened, I believed the Indians at face value, like everyone else did. It was only as the evidence came in that I had to revise my opinion about the nature of the attack. So with the huge caveat that based upon the information that we have right now,
Yeah,
this is an important escalation in a couple of ways. One, it went after the Punjab, which is Pakistan's strategic heartland, right? The NWF, the KPK, formerly the NWFP, is not Pakistan's strategic heartland.
that's
So
right.
this is a significant escalation in
Yeah.
terms of the type of target, and it also means that Pakistan's response is going to be forthcoming. We just don't know what that's going to be yet. And I have no ability to assess Pakistan's claims that it shot down 5 Indian aircraft. I'm deeply dubious, but we just have to see. It's still for
Well,
me 6:10 in the morning.
right. Last question, Professor Fair. The Indus Waters Treaty that India suspended in the immediate aftermath of the Pahalgam attack. Now, we've seen in the last couple of days that the Baghlihar Dam's sluice gates have been shut. First, they stopped the water to, in the Chenab. Then, anyway, the flow of the water has filled up the dam again, and you need the water for generating electricity as well. But this stop flow, what does it mean to you? How does the international community respond to the Indian decision to do this?
So personally, I don't think this is the most effective thing that the Indians can do. The Chinese, there are also water treaties that affect India that India's neighbors have, over which the Chinese have a lot of influence, and this could get to be reciprocal and nasty pretty quickly. And then also, this isn't a trivial matter. Cutting off water to a country is an act of war, so there's only so much the Indians can do before the Pakistanis treat it what it is. But you and I haven't really discussed the other way in which the Indians can and quite frankly does respond to Pakistani provocations. And that is through terrorist attacks in Pakistan itself. India has a very competent intelligence organization. One of the ways that I would anticipate India to be responding is similarly through covert action. And so what we've seen between these two countries over the years is that there's a lot of spy for spy business.
Right.
So this is an important other way that the Indians can respond.
So what about the China question? Do you think that the Chinese will come out and support the Pakistanis in this particular crisis?
I expect they will. I mean, the way the Chinese played a role at the UN Security Council to get a very milquetoast statement about the attack. I suspect they will. As the crisis continues to escalate, as I anticipate that it will, I expect China to be a little bit more even-handed. Remember, in Kargil, I would say Kargil perhaps one of the most important voices that counseled Pakistan to literally stand down and move its Northern Light Infantry out of Kargil was
Right.
China telling it to do so.
Hmm.
So we are going to need to have some sagacious Chinese advice going to the Pakistanis if we really want to have this crisis remain at a level uh, that is limited. And given the relationship between the U.S. and China right now, I don't think those lines of communication are going to be very effective.
Professor Christine Fair, thank you so much for your time, for speaking to me at the Tribune and to explaining the repercussions and the importance of the Indian missile strikes and the wake of the Pahalgam attack. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.